Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
And today we're embarking on a deep dive into an aesthetic that often gets dismissed as, a niche internet meme,
Right.
but which, we're going to argue, is the perfect and maybe even a profound commentary on the state of culture and reality in the 21st century.
That's right. We are dissolving into the haze of Vaporwave. If you, our listener, have ever scrolled past an image featuring a badly rendered, pixelated sunset, maybe a neon grid fading into some infinite void.
Or heard a snippet of incredibly slow, looped elevator music that felt profoundly yet inexplicably melancholic.
And you've been there. You know the feeling. And today we are tackling what we're calling the existential itch of manufactured nostalgia.
It's an itch that I think gets worse every year. Why do we, as humans, feel such an intense, almost physical longing for cultural artifacts and entire eras that are, well, often just simulations?
The media representation of the past.
Exactly. Or for eras that many of us, especially younger generations, never even lived through. It's this feeling of having a memory without ever experiencing the original event.
It's memory unanchored. And the specific artifact we are using as our focus today is Vaporwave, a sonic mirage born in the early 2010s.
Right out of the darker corners of online forums.
It began, yes, disguised as irony, as a kind of detached joke, but it very quickly became this sophisticated, potent cultural critique.
So we're using this musical genre as our roadmap.
A roadmap to navigate one of the most powerful and frankly terrifying philosophical concepts of the digital age, Jean Baudrillard's hyperreality.
And the high stakes here couldn't be clearer. If we ignore this deep dive, if we just dismiss Vaporwave as a quirky genre,
Which is easy to do.
very easy, we risk losing the ability to distinguish between genuine cultural memory, that which is rooted in shared lived experience, and an endless, moreless loop of simulation.
A loop that just keeps reproducing itself until the original
Yeah.
referent is entirely forgotten.
It just disappears.
So we need to name the enemy. We need to identify the villain that's driving this whole process of cultural decay.
That villain, in Baudrillard's terms, is the procession of simulacra. And it's not a single person or entity. It's the fundamental logic of digital capitalism.
Okay, so it's a system.
It's a system, one that reduces everything, culture, art, memory, which are all essentially just signs, to endlessly detached, infinitely recyclable loops. The system doesn't care what the signs mean.
Only that they keep circulating.
As long as they're in motion, that's all that matters.
Okay, let's try to unpack this using what we're calling the master analogy. We're going to come back to this throughout the deep dive because I think it brings this lofty philosophy right down to earth.
I think so too. Think of it this way. Vaporwave is the sound of finding a discarded, obsolete piece of technology. Let's say a floppy disk.
Okay, I can picture that.
And on this floppy disk is a poorly rendered, pixelated commercial for a forgotten 1990s product. Maybe it's a long-defunct brand of computer or some clunky piece of office software.
Something nobody uses anymore.
Completely useless now. You watch this broken, glitchy video, and you feel this intense, melancholic nostalgia. That longing is for the idea of that time, for that product's promise, even though you probably never saw the original polished high-definition commercial when it first aired.
Wow, okay. The genius of that analogy is that the emotion is absolutely real. The melancholy, that longing for a lost simplicity, that's a genuine feeling.
It is.
But the object that triggered it, the video, is a broken copy of a simulation that was trying to sell you a fantasy in the first place.
The emotion is real, but the object is a broken copy of a simulation. That right there is the core dynamic we're talking about.
So the fundamental binary we are wrestling with throughout this entire discussion is simple, but as you said, insidious.
It's reality, which Baudrillard calls the original referent, versus the simulation, which is the simulacrum.
And when the simulacrum wins,
We enter hyperreality.
let's ground ourselves in the artifact itself then. We need to look at the physical sound, the material reality of this simulated art. How is this music, which feels so detached and ethereal, actually constructed?
It's built entirely on the principle of appropriation and decontextualization, which is, it's why it serves as the perfect vehicle for discussing Baudrillard's ideas on the death of the original.
Right. So Vaporwave is constructed by aggressive sampling. And we're talking about source material mostly lifted from the late 80s and early 90s.
The height of a certain kind of consumer culture. Smooth jazz, new wave, R&B, synth pop.
And this is crucial. Corporate hold music or stock library tracks, music designed to be completely innocuous.
Background noise. The core technical strategy is what transforms this raw material into a critique.
And that technique is basically deceleration.
It is. They take the source, they slow down dramatically, sometimes by as much as 30%, add layers of heavy reverb, distortion, and delay, and then they loop these small hypnotic snippets into what become deeply dissociative soundscapes.
Let's focus on the philosophy of that slowdown for a moment. Because by reducing the tempo, the artist isn't just creating a mood, they're doing something more critical.
They are. They're stripping away the original source material's mandated corporate urgency.
What do you mean by that?
Well, pop music, especially from that era, is engineered for excitement, for consumption, for speed. It's meant to get you moving, get you buying.
Okay.
When you slow it down, you expose the hollow core beneath that polished surface. You turn the upbeat consumerist mandate into this haunted, drawn-out dirge.
That exposure is the critical move. The pioneers of the genre established this template almost instantly.
They really did.
Mm.
Daniel Lopatin, using the alias Chuck Person, released Echo Jam's Volume 1 in 2010. And that work transformed incredibly mundane commercials and forgotten pop hits.
The sonic residue of everyday commerce.
Exactly. It turned that into these surreal, almost unsettling soundscapes. It took the most disposable sound of consumerism and elevated it into a haunted art form, showing us the ghosts in the machine.
But I think the landmark example, the one that truly defined the visual and sonic parameters of the genre, has to be Ramon Xavier's work as Vectroid.
Oh, for sure. Particularly her 2011 album Floral Shop, under the alias Macintosh Plus.
It's iconic.
Absolutely. The key track, 420, or Lisa Frank 420 Modern Computing, is the Rosetta Stone of Vaporwave.
So what is it? What's the source?
It's a chopped and screwed transformation of Diana Ross's It's Your Move. The original track has a very specific, direct emotional cadence. The Vaporwave version strips that intent away entirely.
It hollows it out.
It does. It turns a piece of functional pop music into something beautiful, deeply melancholic, utterly detached from its original purpose.
It evokes a kind of cyberpunk utopia laced with irony, yes. But what you said there is key. It's the sound of decay rendered beautiful. We see this philosophy of decaying consumption repeated in other key works.
Like those by 18 Karat Affair, which explicitly focused on the aesthetics of abandoned malls.
The physical architectural ghosts of consumerism.
Those become the visual and acoustic setting for what the source calls hauntological echoes. These spaces were once temples of consumption, promising infinite choice and endless prosperity.
And now they're just cavernous ruins, silent and fluorescent lit.
Exactly.
The visuals are, in many ways, just as crucial as the sound. You really can't separate the Vaporwave experience from its aesthetic categories. We're talking about empty malls, those classic liminal spaces.
Glitchy Windows 95 interfaces, neon grids that seem to stretch into infinity.
And those pervasive marble Greek busts superimposed on these vaporous, often pink and blue backgrounds.
This specific pairing is what gets categorized as hyperreal nostalgia. You see distorted corporate logos, outdated retro tech icons like dial-up modems and CRT monitors.
And these surreal landscapes that blend decaying nature-like palm trees that look a little too green with digital relics.
What's so fascinating, and what brings us right back to Baudrillard, is the deliberate juxtaposition of all these symbols. You have the symbols of ancient permanence, the Greek bust, representing classical ideals, eternal form.
Placed in the context of the most fleeting, obsolete technology imaginable, like Windows 95 graphics or a geometric grid that was supposed to represent the future in 1985.
It's a complete saturation of signs that no longer point to anything stable.
And this saturation, this pileup of images, brings us to the first crucial concept decoder we need to define. This concept explains how these disparate symbols are able to coexist without any sense of hierarchy.
Let's call this the rhizomatic remix.
For the listener driving right now, what's the simple read on that?
A rhizomatic remix, and this echoes the philosopher Deleuze, is a non-linear, non-hierarchical way of connecting ideas or images. So elements don't connect vertically, like the branches and roots of a tree, where one thing grows logically from another.
Okay, not cause and effect.
Not at all. They connect horizontally. They just pile up laterally into a shared, homogeneous, non-structured space.
So when a Vaporwave collage places a Greek bust next to a Japanese character set, next to a distorted corporate logo, they all become equivalent signs. They lose their original hierarchy of value.
Precisely. The classical ideal is given the exact same weight as a poorly rendered piece of clip art.
The source quote that really nails the essence of vaporwave structure is, "A rhizomatic remix, echoing Deleuze, piling unconscious images into a homogeneous space that humanizes machines while reproducing alienation."
That quote perfectly encapsulates the paradox, doesn't it? The artists are reworking machine-produced artifacts, music, corporate graphics into something that feels humanized. That melancholy feels deeply human.
It gives us this illusion of control over those dehumanized corporate processes.
But in doing so, they are just reproducing the alienation that existed in the first place. Only now, it's veiled in this layer of irony and beauty.
And that leads directly into the critical component here, the paradox of irony. Vaporwave blends this intense, cool detachment with a profound sorrow.
The music is smooth, pleasant, it humanizes the machine sounds, but the endless loop itself just reproduces alienation. It is not mere parody. It's not a simple joke about bad music.
Right, parody implies a clear target. You're laughing at something. This is different.
Critique implies an engagement with the structure. This is what's called nostalgic re-aestheticization. It's highlighting capitalism's ghosts, but setting them in a virtual paradise.
The artists are taking the familiar, comforting sounds of consumption, the background noise of our lives, and they're estranging them, transforming them into something haunted.
And that act of slowing down the sample, it doesn't just change the mood. It literally exposes the artificial nature of the original tempo, that original corporate mandate that demanded urgency.
If we look closely at those Greek busts again, they offer a perfect visual analogy for this critique. The busts are simulations of classical perfection, designed to evoke a stable, eternal past.
But they're often colored neon pink and placed in front of a glitchy digital backdrop. The idea of permanence is rendered in the most fleeting, artificial, and electronically volatile medium possible.
That is the visual language of the simulacrum speaking.
It absolutely is.
So, if the sound and visuals of Vaporwave are these hyperreal artifacts, we now need to move to the philosophy that explains why that artifact generates such a complex, detached kind of melancholy. We need the engine room.
Baudrillard's mechanism.
Okay, let's step inside the mechanism that powers this entire critique. The central distinction, our core binary is pretty clear. Reality versus simulation.
Right. But the hidden mechanism, the rule that makes this distinction collapse, is really what defines our digital age.
And the rule is that the simulation, the copy, the map, the sign, it doesn't just reflect reality, the original territory.
No, it eventually supplants it. It creates copies that exist without ever having had an original. Baudrillard's work, starting with simulacra and simulation back in 1981, established the logical sequence for how our world transitioned from being based on the real to being based on these detached, self-referential signs.
It's important to say we've fundamentally moved beyond just talking about fakes or lies.
Oh, completely. We've entered a different ontological space where the distinction between true and false just ceases to matter. The simulation has become truer than the real thing.
So let's define the mechanism that governs this collapse.
This is the procession of simulacra.
Okay, how do we break that down for someone hearing it for the first time?
This is the sequence where the copy progressively moves further and further away from the original, until the copy exists without any original at all. It constantly moves ahead of and effectively devours the real.
It leads it into oblivion.
The source quote is precise and chilling. A procession of simulacra that devours the real. And to really grasp this devouring, we need to look at Baudrillard's 4 stages of the sign. This is the logic of how culture decays into vapor.
Stage 1 is relatively simple. It represents the oldest form of communication we have.
The sign reflects a profound reality. Think of a photograph documenting a historical event or an accurate map of a physical place. The sign has an anchor in the real world.
A clear one-to-one relationship.
Exactly. Stage 2 marks the beginning of the decay. The sign starts to mask and pervert a reality. The image or the sign is still connected to the original, but its function is now to obscure it, manipulate it, or glorify it beyond recognition.
So most of modern advertising lives here.
This is the era of most modern advertising, yes. Using sex appeal to mask the mediocrity of a product, for example, the sign is not quite honest anymore.
And stage 3 is where our connection to history really starts to fray.
The sign masks the absence of a profound reality. The system or the belief that the sign used to represent is now gone or irrelevant, but the sign itself continues to circulate and function.
Like political rhetoric that invokes these long-dead ideological certainties that no longer hold sway.
But the words continue to be used as empty signifiers. It's an empty vessel that pretends to hold substance.
And that brings us to stage 4, the destination of Vaporwave and the stage we are increasingly inhabiting.
The sign bears no relation to any reality whatsoever. It is a pure simulacrum. The copy refers only to other copies, existing in this self-sustaining loop. There is no truth or falsity to it because there's no original territory to compare it against.
So this is deepfakes or entirely AI-generated narratives of history.
Exactly. The anchor is completely gone.
Wait, I have to pause here because this is a question that always comes up. If Baudrillard is arguing that all signs eventually become these detached simulacra, and he's using language and writing signs themselves to make this critique, isn't that a contradiction?
That's a really important question, and it speaks to the sophistication of his critique. He isn't saying that communication is impossible.
Okay.
He's saying that meaning is imploding in a system saturated by copies. He operates from the position that the medium is the message, but now the medium is entirely self-referential. He's describing the process, not prescribing a solution through language.
So his writing style itself is part of the critique.
His dense, often paradoxical style is an attempt to disrupt the smooth flow of the hyperreal system. He's using a kind of intellectual collage, much like Vaporwave uses sonic collage, to shake the reader out of passive acceptance.
I see. He's deliberately creating a rupture, a moment of friction in the system of smooth signs. And this entire process, all 4 stages, leads us directly to the state we're discussing.
Hyperreality.
Let's put that into a working definition. Hyperreality.
For the listener who needs the simple read, hyperreality is the state where simulations become so indistinguishable from or even replace the reality they were supposed to represent.
We are no longer observing the map from a safe distance.
We are living entirely inside the map, and the physical territory it was supposed to describe has essentially vanished.
The source material is definitive here. A state where simulations supplant reality and signs refer only to other signs detached from any origin.
This is the environment in which Vaporwave thrives and makes perfect logical sense. The genre doesn't reference the real, messy, politically complicated 1980s.
No, it references the media representations of the 1980s.
Which were themselves already polished simulations of consumer desire.
That makes the 80s the perfect launchpad for this critique. That era was the height of high capitalism, driven by powerful, shiny media images, MTV, massive corporate branding, the utopian promise of synth pop optimism.
Right. That era was already operating firmly in Baudrillard's Stage 2 or even Stage 3. It was already selling a specific, polished, aspirational reality that was largely manufactured.
So it was already a simulation of prosperity.
It was. And Vaporwave, coming decades later, samples those already manufactured signs, slows them down, and creates something new. It's a simulation of a dream. It's pure Stage 4. It's an artifact twice removed from reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting and personal for the listener, because when you listen to that slowed down, echoing sample, you are feeling deep, profound nostalgia for a manufactured optimism that you never actually bought into.
That feeling, the melancholy, the longing for an uncomplicated, slick future is real. But the historical object of that longing is utterly absent.
It's an empty sign generating a genuine emotion.
And that emptiness is Baudrillard's key insight. He describes a media-saturated society where events are lived through their representations, not through actual encounters. Vaporwave doesn't want to go back to the real decade.
It wants to go back to the feeling of the 80s as depicted in a perfectly lit, forgotten soft drink commercial that promised happiness through consumption.
The desire is real, but the object is vapor.
Now we connect the philosophical dots directly back to the sound of that glitchy, sad music. We've established that Vaporwave is built on remix nostalgia, but let's really examine what happens when that nostalgia is fundamentally hyperreal.
Well, the genre's longing is for a simulated past in 80s and 90s that were already, as the source notes, a pop archetype without foundation. The original cultural product was already a polished, aspirational, mediated dream.
Let's take a deeper look at the process. We can use the example of Waterfront Dining's Miami Wicked, which is a Vaporwave redo of Gloria Estefan's Falling in Love.
Right. The source describes this process as creating a dreamlike reimagining of what was already a dream image. So the remix isn't an attempt to bring back reality.
It's a commitment to doubling down on the fantasy.
Exactly, but acknowledging its decay at the same time.
That doubling down is the ultimate key move of the simulacrum. It doesn't deny the existence of reality, it just renders it completely irrelevant to the cultural conversation.
The remix exists solely in relation to the previous song's representation of desire, not actual human experience or composition. It is culture recycling itself as pure imitation, blurring the past and present in total hyperreal detachment.
And this soundscape is the perfect musical mirror for what Baudrillard was describing, the inability to anchor oneself in history.
It captures that inability to distinguish real from fiction. It is, as the source calls it, the schizophrenic soundscape amid ruins of history.
That term, schizophrenic soundscape, suggests a total fragmentation of time and meaning.
It does. If the signs, the cultural references, the sounds, the logos are constantly circulating without anchors, history itself becomes ruins. We can't construct a stable narrative because every piece of data, every reference, is just another floating equivalent sign.
Thanks to that rhizomatic remixing.
And the music loops endlessly, repeating the same four-bar sequence, much like the process of remediation where signs just circulate in this eternal, mournful deferral.
That sense of mournfulness, of looking back at a future that never arrived, brings us to the next critical concept decoder. This one explains the specific feeling of decay in the music.
Hauntology.
Okay, let's put that into a working definition.
Hauntology, a philosophical idea originally from Derrida, is not simple nostalgia for the past. It's about lost futures.
Lost futures.
It describes the ghostly return of elements from the past, like obsolete technology, forgotten interfaces, musical styles, that never quite materialized or resolved the grand promises they held. It's mourning the unfulfilled potential of a previous era.
So, it's not just being sad the 90s are over. It's mourning the failure of the specific utopian digital future the 90s promised us.
The frictionless connectivity, the endless consumer boom, the perfect digital interface.
All the things that never actually materialized in a humane way.
Exactly. We have to look at those lost futures specifically. We have the collapse of retail culture. The empty mall aesthetic is the ghost of infinite tactile consumption. We have the stalled digital utopia. The glitchy Windows 95 interface represents the failure of early web aesthetics to become the universal democratic structure it promised.
The source notes that the genre's obsession with obsolete interfaces and lost futures totalizes a loop of remediation.
And if hyperreality is the broken copy, then hauntology is the melancholy feeling we get when we look at the obsolete technology on that floppy disk in our master analogy.
It's the mourning of what that floppy disk represented to us 30 years ago versus what it is now, a piece of plastic junk containing a broken advertisement.
And this decay isn't just conceptual, it's literal in the music. We hear digital decay and ideological certainty eroding at the same time.
The melodies warp into static.
The symbols of consumerism dissolve into noise. The sound itself is falling apart. The heavy reverb and the slowed tempo literally render the signs of consumption unstable and temporary.
This symbolism is key. It shows the erosion of ideological certainties under digital capitalism. The objects that were supposed to provide meaning, corporate success, technological progress, consumer goods are reduced to playthings.
They're hyperreal and moreless. They have no intrinsic value. They're just aesthetic signs to be chopped and screwed.
Baudrillard termed this reduction of culture into infinitely recyclable signs abuse.
He argued it was the triumph of the simulacrum. He foresaw our current hypersign era, where meaning proliferates yet evaporates.
Yeah.
We are swimming in more signs, more data, more images than ever before.
Yet they signify less and less because they only refer to each other.
When Vaporwave emerged in the early 2010s, it was responding to the tail end of Web 2.0 optimism. The artists used irony and collage to highlight the vacuum, the intellectual exhaustion of remix culture. They were trying to critique the system.
They forced the listener to see the strings, to see the artificiality. They were conscious critics manipulating the samples.
Yes, exactly. But now we arrive at the highest stakes of this discussion. What happens when that irony is removed and the manipulation is automated?
If the four-bar loop of Vaporwave critiqued endless consumption, we now have algorithms that create infinite perfect loops without ever needing a human hand to guide the irony.
That is the essential pivot. The philosophical critique that Vaporwave offered through ironic, human-guided collage is now being accelerated, automated, and stripped of its critical intent by AI.
We're moving beyond Baudrillard's 4 stages into an entirely new, even purer form of simulation.
We are entering the phase of generative hyperreality. If Vaporwave was the critical realization that the map had devoured the territory,
then AI is the engine that prints the map.
instantly, autonomously, and flawlessly, without ever needing a territory to compare it against or a human intent to guide it.
Okay, let's unpack this acceleration, because this is where the Vaporwave critique becomes truly urgently relevant to today. How exactly does AI function as an accelerator of Baudrillardian decay?
Modern generative models, whether they're generating music like Udio or Suno or generating images or text, they're replicating styles from vast historical datasets.
So they're sampling everything.
Everything. They are simulating creativity without any required human experience or original referent in the way an artist would have one. The output is mathematically plausible, it's aesthetically compelling, but it is entirely anchorless. It substitutes code's effects for genuine truth or lived experience.
So Vaporwave artists used sampling, slowing, and reverb to reveal the process of consumption and decay. They left the glitches in on purpose.
They did. AI uses sampling and generation to erase the process. It presents a finished, seamless product that is already pure simulacra, a perfect, automated stage 4 sign.
Precisely. The core philosophical danger here is the total erosion of authorship. AI produces autonomous realities, surreal songs, and images that are increasingly indistinguishable from human work.
Yet they are completely detached from origins, unique human motivation, or specific cultural lived experience.
This blurs authorship, yes, and it paradoxically democratizes the ability to generate music while simultaneously diminishing the value of that creativity.
That's a great way to put it. If a perfect 4-minute synth track that sounds exactly like a forgotten 80s hit can be generated in 30 seconds by a system that has no memory of the 80s.
Why bother crafting it over years?
And the practical consequence of this is playing out right now in massive lawsuits over AI's unauthorized sampling and training on human work. The system is consuming the last vestiges of reality actual human output to feed the generation of endless copies.
It's the final stage of the procession of simulacra.
It is. And this is where the technological exploitation of manufactured memory reaches its zenith. We're taking the idea of the perfect simulacrum and placing it on a concert stage, exploiting nostalgia with technology.
The examples are stark and unavoidable.
Holograms like Tupac's, or the use of digital doubles like the aviators. These are perfect, controllable simulacra. They are flawless, repeatable, and non-aging copies of performers, unbound by the limitations of the human body.
And this is where the philosophy becomes acutely dark and gothic. The source notes that this signifies the death of the original performer.
We are exploiting their memory while creating a representation that is infinitely more perfect than the aging, imperfect, living human ever was. It's the ultimate triumph of the sign over the fragile, finite body.
And look at the difference in intent here. Vaporwave used the slowdown and the glitch to critique the corporate machine that wanted the human body to perform endlessly.
And AI provides a way for the corporate machine to replace the human body with an endless, perfect simulacrum that never needs rest, never argues about residuals, and never ever ages.
We're seeing the real-time critical response to this. Sheryl Crow's 2024 song, Evolution, specifically critiques AI duplicating her voice.
Right. She's reacting to the same uncanny valley that Vaporwave artists explored, but where Vaporwave used intentional irony and collage to make a point to show the detachment.
AI simply is the detachment.
It creates a void that transforms art into pure entropy.
So let's solidify our final high-stakes concept decoder, the one that really encapsulates where we are today.
Generative hyperreality.
For the listener, the simple read is, this is the state where technology autonomously creates flawless, anchorless copies based on massive historical data sets.
And in doing so, it bypasses the need for human experience or intent, thereby accelerating cultural decay and confusing code's effects for truth.
The output is surreal songs indistinguishable from human work yet detached from origins. The irony is gone.
And that anchorlessness is the terrifying conclusion of our deep dive. In the Vaporwave critique, there was still a human hand manipulating the sample, slowing it down, adding reverb, making a conscious aesthetic choice to highlight the artificiality.
To highlight the abuse of the source material.
Exactly. In generative hyperreality, the choice is made by the algorithm to maximize plausibility and seamless perfection. The system is feeding itself perfectly, and the void is complete.
Vaporwave offered a mirror, a way to understand the hyperreal system by making its flaws beautiful.
AI offers a window, a perfect, clear window onto a reality that never existed, substituting the effect of a feeling for the truth of human experience. It eliminates the friction that irony once provided.
The generation of a seamless, perfectly melancholy 80s synth track is an even purer form of hyperreality because it has eliminated the last trace of the original human reference point.
The last ghost in the machine.
This has been an extensive journey through pixelated sunsets and the profound void beneath the endless remix. But the synthesis is undeniable. Vaporwave and Baudrillard converge in a sonic void that perfectly captured the philosophical state of our cultural exhaustion long before AI made it so concrete.
The deep dive shows us that the retro synths looping into oblivion perfectly mirror the philosophical erosion of authenticity caused by the rapid progression from media saturation to automated AI intervention.
We started by analyzing manufactured nostalgia, and we are ending with fully autonomous nostalgia.
We are all collectively living our filtered digital selves. We are constantly crafting and refining our personal simulacra for online consumption, performing a life that is often several stages removed from the profound reality we seek.
Vaporwave reminds us of the abyss beneath that endless remix.
And perhaps our only form of resistance now is to actively craft our own ironic collages, to be intentional, critical, and friction-inducing in our creation, to resist the procession of simulacra.
We must recognize that the signs of the past are now being printed in the present by machines that have no memory of the original human referent.
And we must fight to keep a tiny sliver of genuine memory alive.
The map has devoured the territory, leaving only vaporous echoes.
So if cultural authenticity is now generated by algorithms detached from human experience, what does that mean for the next generation's ability to create genuine cultural memory and not just another perfect, flawless layer of simulation?
Something to mull over the next time you hear a perfectly generated synth line that sounds just a little too smooth, a little too familiar, and profoundly, perfectly sad. We reached the end of this deep dive.